Didn't you get rid of your cold since Copenhagen? Since Lama-Zopa was in Copenhagen?
No, this is a different cold. Yeah, that's right. Last year I had.
Yeah.
That's right. Last year I forgot.
Yeah, you had a cold.
I had a
there
really
too,
bad
yeah.
cold, and
Yeah,
also
yeah.
Joan. Two of us were coughing and sneezing. No, I got rid of that one. This is a new one.
Yeah.
Maybe it's got something to do with this. So I thought that, because I was just talking about impermanence, and this is a topic for meditation. And some of you were here last night, and I spoke about the two main types of meditation. One is stabilizing meditation, and that's where we have an object that we focus on and try to stay focused on for longer and longer periods of time to develop concentration. And then there's this other type of meditation that is called analytical meditation, and that involves using thought, using thinking, and more like contemplation or reflection. And so I thought maybe it would be nice to do some of that type of meditation now on this topic of impermanence, to try to have a better understanding. Because the real purpose of doing analytical meditation is to understand more deeply some idea, subject, topic from the Buddhist teachings, so that instead of just being intellectual knowledge, it actually becomes deeper and eventually becomes our own experience, something we actually experience in a very real and spontaneous way. Okay, so what I'll be doing in this meditation is talking part of the time. So just do the best you can to stay focused or concentrated on what I'm saying, what I'm asking you to think about. So sit, if you can, with your back straight. That helps the mind to be more focused, more concentrated. And you can close your eyes if you wish, but in the Tibetan tradition, at least in the Gelugpa tradition, we are advised not to close our eyes completely, because doing that can lead to sleepiness. So it's good to keep the eyes open a little bit, so there's some light coming in, and that helps us to stay awake and alert during the meditation. So relax while still keeping your back straight. Let your body relax. And see if you can decide or determine that during this meditation you'll just stay focused on the topic we're meditating on, impermanence. And if other thoughts come up in your mind that are not related to this topic, that you will put them aside. And you can always think about them later if you really wish to, but just decide that for now you'll put aside other thoughts and just stay focused on impermanence. So let's begin by thinking about the impermanence of our own body. So just get a feel of your body sitting where you are, on the chair or on the cushion. So does your body seem to be something very solid and unchanging? You know, like it's always there and it's always the same. Maybe it changes from time to time, but from one moment to the next, it pretty much seems to be the same. So is that how your body seems to be? Is that how you feel your body to be? Or you could ask yourself, the body that you have right now at this moment, is it the same as the body that you had when you first arrived here this morning? So I think if we really look at our the feeling we have or the conception we have about our body, it does seem that it's pretty much the same. It doesn't seem like it's changing moment by moment. But the Buddha said our body is changing moment by moment, and scientists say the same. So let's just contemplate that. So one way we can understand that is to think about how our body is made up of many parts. It isn't just one whole solid thing. So it's composed of more gross parts, such as the things we can see, skin, and inside we know we have bones and we have organs and blood. And then those larger parts of the body, components of the body, are in turn made of smaller parts. For example, cells, very minute particles we can only see under a microscope. And cells are not frozen, static things, but they're almost alive, moving and changing, coming into existence, reproducing, going out of existence. So just contemplate that, get a feel for that, that your body is made up of millions or billions of these tiny cells that are constantly going through changes. And then at an even subtler level, there are even smaller particles such as molecules and atoms and subatomic particles like quarks. So the scientists are constantly exploring these small particles and finding ever smaller, finer particles of matter. And they haven't found a basic particle, which is like the building block of everything else. However deeply they go, they find more and more tiny particles. But what we know about these particles is that they too are not frozen, static, unmoving, unchanging things, but they're constantly moving and changing. So just contemplate that. This is not something we can actually see with our eyes, right now anyway. but we can know it intellectually, conceptually. So just try to get a sense of how your body, even though it seems very solid, is actually not so solid. It's actually made up of these little particles that are always going through changes. And that means your body is actually changing every single moment. It's not the same from one moment to the next. And now, contemplate that not only is your body like this, but all the other physical or material phenomena around us. So that includes, for example, the clothes that we're wearing, and the chair or cushion that you're sitting on, the other people who are in this room, their bodies, and all the other things in the room, the furniture, the things on the walls, the room itself, made of walls and floor and ceiling, and so on. Just continue thinking about the things around you, around us. All these material, physical things, even though they may seem quite solid and relatively unmoving, unchanging, but in reality, all of these things are made up of small particles, molecules, atoms, and so on, which are not so solid and are always going through changes. And another thing that is impermanent is our mind, our consciousness. So that includes all of our experiences, all of our awarenesses. So it includes thoughts, memories, fantasies about the future. It includes all of our emotions, sad or happy, angry or loving, curious or frightened, and so on. We have many different kinds of feelings or emotions, and they are all part of the mind according to Buddhism. And it also includes our basic sensory experiences, seeing, hearing, smell, taste, touch, feeling sensations in our body. So Buddhism says our mind is like a river, a stream, made up of many different experiences, arising and passing, arising, passing, arising, passing. So our mind too is impermanent. It's changing all the time, every moment. Every moment there are some new experiences coming up, and then they pass away and other ones come up. So just for a few moments, see if you can observe this happening. Just try to observe your mind, your consciousness, all these different experiences coming and going. Try to see how your mind too is impermanent. Okay, so when you feel ready to come out of the meditation, you can slowly relax your concentration and open your eyes. So, at this point in time, we aren't able to have a direct experience of impermanence because it's something very subtle. You know, I think intellectually it's not too difficult to understand, and I think it's something we can't really deny because it's supported by the findings of science. So there's definite evidence or proof that things are changing all the time. So even though it's not something we directly see or experience, but intellectually we can come to know it and understand it. But it's said that in the Buddhist path, through the practice of meditation, it is possible to get to the point where one can have a direct experience, a direct perception of impermanence, or actually see the changes that are happening all the time, moment by moment, in our body and all the things in the world around us and so on. But I think that even before having that kind of experience, just to have an intellectual understanding of emptiness, impermanence, is quite helpful. Because often our emotional reactions to things occur because of not understanding impermanence, and instead kind of going against impermanence, wanting things to be permanent. So for example, with attachment, this emotion of attachment to our body, attachment to people, attachment to things. Within attachment, there's usually this feeling of wanting that object to stay the same and not change. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah? I mean, that's really what attachment is all about. I want you to be there just like that forever and never go away. I want my body to be a certain way and not get old and wrinkled and my hair to turn gray and so on. And so we kind of go against impermanence. We want things to be permanent. But that's just not the way things are. Things are impermanent. They do change. And then when they change, we can get very unhappy, upset, even angry, even suicidal. So having an understanding of impermanence and gradually getting familiar with that, making ourselves acquainted with the impermanent nature of things, really helps us to be more accepting when changes do occur, instead of getting all upset. Does that make sense? Just an example, many years ago I was living in Los Angeles, and there was a group of people who would meet every week to have a meditation class. They were living in Beverly Hills, which is this very nice area, very expensive houses, but it's also in the hills. And I guess the earth, the earth of the hills there isn't very solid. So sometimes when there would be rain, a lot of rain, then there would be mudslides, and some of the houses would collapse and fall down. So that happened with one of the people who was coming to this meditation group. So from one week to another, his house collapsed. So he told us when we met for the meditation group, he told us about his house collapsing, and he was pretty cool about it. He said, because last week we were talking about impermanence and meditating on impermanence. So when this happened, I just thought, well, that's impermanence. But he said his wife, who wasn't coming to the meditation group, hadn't heard about impermanence, hadn't meditated on it. She wasn't too calm about it. She was very upset. So it seemed that having thought about it and meditated on impermanence even just once helped him to be more accepting of this disaster that happened to his house. But anyway, that's one benefit of getting more familiar with impermanence. It does help us to be more accepting of and not so shocked and upset when changes do occur. I'm saying less shocked, we might still be shocked and upset, but less so than if we had never, ever contemplated impermanence. Okay, so that's one of the benefits. It helps us to be more calm and accepting of changes when they occur. And also another benefit is with regard to our mind, working with our mind. Because when disturbing thoughts and emotions come up in our mind, if we don't understand impermanence, then we can get quite upset. And let's say depression, for example. So if you have the tendency to get depressed, so then if depression comes up in the mind, on top of the depression, you might have this additional attitude of, oh no, there's depression again. Oh, I'm going to be like this forever. It's never going to go away. Not that you deliberately think that way, but I notice this in myself. This is something that happens. It almost seems like this state of mind, this unpleasant state of mind, is just going to last forever and never go away. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah. Or with anger, or with any kind of painful or disturbing state of mind, there might be some sense, some subtle sense of, oh, it's going to be there forever. It's never going to change, never going to go away. And it's just not true. Right? It's clearly not true. We all have experiences of going through phases of being depressed or being angry or being whatever, and then it passes. So all of these states of mind are temporary, transitory, impermanent. So if we remind ourselves of that, if we say you can say to yourself, okay, there's depression in my mind, but it's not going to be there forever. It's not going to last forever. It's temporary. It's impermanent. It's really magical. Sometimes it goes away right away. Yeah? Or even if it doesn't go away, at least it's not so heavy. And it'll probably go away more quickly than if you take it really, really seriously and get really upset about it. So that's another way that we can use the idea of impermanence. And with any other kind of problem that happens in our life, or problems we hear about with other people, problems in the world, if we remind ourselves that all of these phenomena are impermanent, then it takes some of the heaviness out of these things, and then our reaction will not be so severe, so upset, so disturbing. Does that make sense? So it's a very helpful technique. And it's easier than emptiness. I mean, the lamas often say, well, meditate on emptiness, think about emptiness. But emptiness is not so easy to understand. So if you don't really understand emptiness, that may not be so helpful. But impermanence is relatively easier to understand, and also to get some taste. You can get some taste of what it means. And so then that's something quite practical, quite useful. I find that for myself, the contemplating impermanence, or reminding myself of impermanence. Sometimes it just very quickly helps to relieve problems. Okay, so now back to the notes. There's a third type of impermanent phenomena on the list here, which has this very complicated name. Non-associated compositional factors. And this includes things that are impermanent, but they don't fit into the other two categories. They're neither form, they're not physical material things, and they also are not mind or consciousness. But they are impermanent. So examples here, one is a year, or any amount of time, a day, an hour, a minute, a month. So these are phenomena. They do exist. They're not physical phenomena. You can't see a year. You can't touch a year. It's also not consciousness, not mind, but it's an impermanent thing. A year changes. Like recently we had the change from 2015 to 2016, and now we're already, 1/4 of the way through 2016. So time is definitely changing all the time. So it's definitely an impermanent phenomenon, but it's neither form, physical, nor consciousness. So they put it in this third category. And another example of this is a person. Now we're going to talk more about that later. What exactly is a person? But just in brief, according to Buddhism, a person, like we are all persons. Okay, in this room there's, I don't know how many, 15 of us. And so we are persons. Now what exactly is a person? This is a big topic in Buddhism. What is a person? What is a being? What is a self? What am I? Yeah. We talk about emptiness, we talk about selflessness, the lack of a self, the lack of a person, but that doesn't mean that we don't exist at all. We do exist, but how do we exist? What exactly is the I, or what exactly is another person? So according to Buddhism, a person is an impermanent phenomena. We do change, a person changes. And it's what is just labeled or imputed on top of our collection of body and mind, collection of physical and mental components. So we are made up of a body, as we just did in the meditation. We contemplated how our body is made up of all these parts and particles, down to these subatomic particles and even beyond that. Okay, so there's just millions, zillions of material particles that make up our body. And we also are made up of a mind. A person also has a mind, consciousness, and that also is made up of many parts, our thoughts, our feelings, emotions, sensations, perceptions, and so on. So we are like a whole mass, a whole collection of physical and mental parts, components. And then in relation to, or on top of this collection of physical and mental components, we give some kind of name or label, where we could say person, I'm a person, or my name, Sangye Kadro, that's my Tibetan name, my nun name, but before that I was called Kathleen McDonald. So it could be any name. Okay, so our parents give us a name. Sometimes we may get another name when we become Buddhist or you get married, and so on. So there's some kind of name or a number of different names or labels that are applied to this mass of physical and mental components. So that's what we are. That's what a person is. And a person is not a specific thing that one can point to, that's kind of existing on its own somewhere within this collection. You can't point to any specific part of our body, any part of our body or the molecules, atoms, and so on. We also can't point to any specific part of our mind, any particular thought or emotion. And whatever you point to is only there for a moment, and then it's already gone. The next moment, something else is there. So because of impermanence, because our body and mind are just these particles that are changing all the time, there's nothing you can really point to as a concrete, unchanging, permanent self or person. But we do exist, so what exists, how we exist, is that we're just labeled onto this collection of physical and mental components. So this is a really hard thing to understand, and one realistically has to do a lot of meditation on it. But anyway, a person is considered another type of impermanent phenomena, but neither form nor consciousness, but just what is labeled or imputed onto a collection of the two, form and consciousness. And I think, my guess is, another example of this would be a country. For example, Sweden. So what is Sweden? Is there a specific thing we can point to as being Sweden? Can we find Sweden somewhere in this mass of geographical space, land, trees, mountains, lakes, cities, towns, roads, cars, people? Okay, is there a specific thing we can point to and say, that is Sweden right there? Probably not, right? So instead, we just give this name, Sweden, to that mass, that collection of all those different things. Land and trees and water and cities and towns and houses and people and so forth. And a government, of course, because a country, to be able to function properly, it needs a government, it needs, all the different kinds of offices, government functions, and so on. So that whole collection of things is given the name Sweden. So it's the same with any country or city, for that matter. Where are we? Stockholm? Okay. So any kind of place, any place is also this third kind of impermanent phenomena. It's an impermanent thing, it changes, but it's not a physical thing. It's also not consciousness. So it's this third kind of phenomena. So this third category of impermanent phenomena, it's a little tricky, a little hard to understand, but it's a category for impermanent things that are changing all the time, but not physical, material, and also not consciousness. Okay, now let's move on to permanent phenomena. This is also a little tricky. So there are some phenomena, some things that exist, which are not even impermanent, but they are permanent. And the meaning of being permanent is that they don't change moment by moment, and they don't arise from causes and conditions. So there are things, they exist, but they don't come into existence due to causes and conditions like our body does, or like a tree, or like a house. So they don't have that kind of way of existing, and they don't change moment by moment. And another term for this type of phenomena is uncompounded phenomena. So let's look at some examples of this. The first, this is the example that's usually given in the text, is non-compounded space, which is defined as the mere lack of obstructive contact. So, space. Now, this is not easy to understand. Space is something that exists, and it's said to pervade everything. Okay? So obviously there's space in this room, like above our heads. Okay, there's space there. And we also talk about outer space, you know, sending rockets, planes, and so forth into space. We also talk about airspace. Every country has airspace, right? So they kind of draw these imaginary lines around the country, and they say, this is our airspace, and you are not allowed to enter our airspace. Okay. So that's one way of talking about space. But this type of space here is said to pervade everything, such that even where there are solid objects, like where the furniture, our bodies, and this building, and so forth. So even where there are solid objects, there's still space there, because if there wasn't space, it wouldn't be possible to put those solid objects there. Yeah? So it's kind of an abstract thing, right? It's abstract. It's not something we can actually see or touch, but it's there. Space is there. It pervades everything. It allows for movement. If that space didn't exist, then it wouldn't be possible to move. We'd be, crammed, frozen, immobile. So it allows for movement. It allows for things to be placed, from one place to another, and so on. And so this is said to be a permanent phenomena. It's not something that comes into existence from causes and conditions, like our bodies. Our bodies, come into existence because of causes and conditions. A tree or flowers come into existence because of seed and water and earth and so forth. So all those causes and conditions come together and the plant grows, the rose grows. So space doesn't come into existence in that way. Okay? It's not that you put together a bunch of causes and conditions and then it rises. It's always there. It's always been there. And it's also said to be unchanging. It doesn't change moment to moment. So this is a little hard to understand. But it's useful to try to understand permanent phenomena, because emptiness, ultimate truth, is another example of a permanent phenomena. So emptiness is something important, something crucial for our spiritual practice, if we wish to follow the path that the Buddha taught and achieve liberation, achieve enlightenment. Understanding emptiness is crucial, because it's only by understanding emptiness that we will be able to completely free our minds from all the disturbing emotions and all the suffering. So suffering and the causes of suffering, the first two truths, they can only be eliminated once and for all, such that they will never arise again, by understanding emptiness. Emptiness being the absence of inherent existence. And it said that emptiness is a permanent phenomena. It's not an impermanent phenomenon. It's something permanent. So even though it's kind of hard to understand permanent phenomena, it's good to at least know that they are there. They do exist. There are things that are permanent, and gradually try to work on an understanding of them. Another example of a permanent phenomena is true cessation, which is the third noble truth. And the third noble truth is called cessation, and it's specifically talking about the cessation of disturbing emotions in our mind. So right now, we probably don't have cessation. We have disturbing emotions. We have anger, we have attachment, we have ignorance, we have fear, worry, anxiety. So we have these disturbing thoughts and emotions that come. They're impermanent, they come and they go, but they keep coming. You know, we might be free of them for a while, but then they come back again. So that's the situation where we don't have cessation. We haven't achieved cessation. Now, a person who has achieved cessation, like a Buddha, anyone who's attained Buddhahood, anyone who's attained enlightenment, who's attained nirvana, they have achieved a cessation. And the meaning of that is that they have eliminated the disturbing emotions such that they never arise again. They're like totally gone, totally stopped, totally ceased. So they never experience anger, they never experience fear, worry, depression, attachment, ignorance. So all of those disturbing emotions are gone forever, and they will never come back. So that's the meaning of cessation, true cessation, and the third noble truth. And that is also a permanent phenomena. It's a phenomena, something that exists, but it's not something that comes about from causes and conditions. It's not compounded. It's not something that changes moment by moment. It's more like an absence. And in fact, that's one thing I notice about these permanent phenomena. They are absences. They're all absences. And the last one on the list here, which you probably find kind of funny, but this is something this is sort of an example that's often given in the text: the absence of an elephant in this room.
But what if it steps in?
Well, if an elephant did walk into this room, the absence of an elephant would not be there anymore.
No. Mm-hmm. So it would be.
But right now,
But how can it be permanent? Or it would be impermanent?
because the absence itself isn't something that changes. The absence itself, yeah, this is one thing we need to understand. A permanent, in fact, I mentioned that on the next page. I turn to the next page. NB, it says, impermanent and permanent, these terms do not have the same meaning in Buddhism as they do in Western context, where impermanent usually means that it comes to an end. So our usual understanding of impermanent means that it will end at some point, and permanent means that it will never end, it will last forever. That's our usual understanding of those terms, right? But in Buddhism, it's not exactly like that. It could be, but not necessarily. Because, for example, the mind or consciousness, that's an impermanent phenomena, right? But according to Buddhism, our mind or consciousness will never end, will never go out of existence. It's going to last forever.
And did it arise from causes and conditions?
The mind.
Yeah.
It does arise from causes and conditions, in the sense that the mind is changing all the time, every minute, every second. So it's almost like every moment we have a new mind. Now that new mind of, let's say, moment B came into existence in dependence on moment A. So the mind that was there on moment A ceased, but changed into moment B. So each moment there's cause and effect.
It's always been there.
But it's always been there. So arising from causes and conditions doesn't necessarily mean something completely new, something coming into existence that didn't exist before. That's true with our bodies. Okay, there was a time when our bodies didn't exist. Before we were born, this body wasn't here, anywhere. And then, coming together of the causes and conditions, our body came into existence. So that's true with our body, but not with our mind. Our mind, they say our mind, you've heard this, beginningless mind, right? They say our mind didn't have a beginning. It's always been there. This is very hard to understand, don't worry. We all have a hard time with that.
Is it like the soul that also is beginningless?
Well, the soul. Now this is a tricky question. I mean, in theistic religions and also in Hinduism, they talk about a soul. They say that we have a soul. But the Buddhist view is that, this is one thing that distinguishes Buddhism from other spiritual traditions, other religions, is that we don't have a soul or a self. Because the idea of a soul is usually, it's kind of a real thing. Like each one of us has a real soul. It's who I really am. And it's somehow permanent and unchanging. I'm not sure if those who believe in a soul really think this through carefully. I was brought up a Catholic, and we were taught that we had a soul, and I just kind of went along with that. And I remember as a child in the books, we had these little books to learn religion, and they'd have drawings, and they'd show that, after people died, they would, the good people, they would go up to heaven. And so they show these people looking just the way they did while they were on earth, but up there in heaven. Okay, so it's almost like me, the way that I am now, some part of me, which looks just like me and is like me, is going to go to heaven. And there I'm going to be with my family and my friends and so on. So it's, what I'm saying? It's like some kind of essence of me that is unchanging. Well, I'm not saying, maybe not everyone thinks that way, but I think this is it's maybe more the popular notion of a soul. Or when there's movies and they have a ghost, a ghost in a movie, the ghost of a person usually looks just like that person, except invisible, right? So it's like an invisible image of that person, but still has the same personality, the same knowledge and experiences, right? So that, it depends. It depends on what you mean by soul.
Yeah,
okay.
It depends on what you mean. Maybe.
Sorry?
Yeah, it depends on what you mean.
What you mean by soul, yeah.
Because it's also the thought that everyone are together and it's one, connected, and I don't see it as a one thing, like you said. I don't see it like that. I see it like something that when you die, then it leaves, and it's not a person. It's
what?
I don't know. Just because it's also interesting that Avam was talking about that you shouldn't separate too much either. You should you should accept every religion and see it as one, that we believe in. Not the same, but how do I say? It's the same thing that we believe in.
Yeah. Well,
but just leave it now.
Yeah, it's a big topic. Yeah, it is a really big topic, and even within Buddhism as well, there are different points of view about what it is that continues to this. There's definitely something. All Buddhists would agree. There is something that continues to exist after death. Death is not like the final end. That's it. Like, the candle going out and finished, never arising again. So all the Buddhists agree that there is something that continues to exist, but exactly what that is and what is its nature, what is its properties and so on, that's a topic of discussion. So in some ways, Buddhism would agree with the theistic religions or religions that believe in a soul, in the sense that there is a continuation.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
So there is something that continues after death.
But isn't it karma that from Buddhist view is similar to soul?
Karma, well, karma is part of it. Karma is part of the equation, part of the story. But karma is more like imprints, karmic imprints. So then what are those imprints imprinted onto? Okay? Like a footprint, you know. To make a footprint, you need some medium, sand or clay or earth or snow, you know, to print the foot into. So what is it that continues carrying the karmic imprints, imprinted with the karmic imprints? That's the tricky thing. In Buddhism, there are different points of view about this, different explanations. It's not a simple, you know, everyone agrees kind of thing. Okay, so anyway, what I was trying to point out here is differences in the meaning of these terms, impermanent and permanent. So the mind or the consciousness, according to Buddhism, that's the stream of thoughts and feelings and experiences. Okay, so according to Buddhism, that is something that has always existed and will always exist. In the Mahayana tradition, it's said that all of us, all beings, will eventually become Buddhas, will become enlightened beings, and then our mind will exist, you know, forever in this enlightened state. It doesn't end. It never goes out of existence. But I've heard there are some Buddhists in the Theravada tradition who think otherwise, who think that when a person becomes a Buddha or they become an Arhat, and that means they attain nirvana, and then when they die, when the body, you know, comes to its end, the mind also comes to an end.
They don't reincarnate
No,
anymore.
no reincarnation, but not even any.
When they arrive to this point, there is no karma anymore.
There's no karma, but they also say there's no mind. Even the mind goes out of existence. Some believe that, but others say, no, that's incorrect. That's not. So that's another topic there's some debate about. Anyway, in the Mahayana tradition, it's believed that the mind never ceases. It will always... So the point here is the mind is impermanent because it's changing moment by moment by moment, but it will last forever. So it doesn't have the usual Western meaning of impermanent in the sense that it will go out of existence. So we have to understand the meaning of impermanence in a different way than our usual one. And then the second example here is that a permanent object, something that's permanent, can go out of existence. Okay? Doesn't necessarily last forever. So the example given, one example is the emptiness of a glass. So emptiness, the ultimate truth, ultimate nature of things, is a quality that everything has. Everything that exists has emptiness as its true nature, its ultimate nature. So the emptiness of an object will exist as long as that object exists. But when that object goes out of existence, its emptiness will go out of existence. So this lovely teacup, you know, if it's smashed into 1,000 pieces and it ceases to be a cup, no longer a cup there, then the emptiness of the cup also ceases to exist. It's no longer there.
Isn't it dependent on causes and conditions then, the emptiness of the cup?
Yeah, it seems like that. It seems like it depends on causes and conditions. I mean, the cup itself depends on causes and conditions. It was made by, I don't know, in a factory with raw materials, porcelain, clay, I don't know what they... Okay, so the cup itself came into existence in dependence on causes and conditions. But the emptiness of the cup, emptiness is a different kind of phenomena, right? It's not a physical phenomena, material phenomena. It's something quite different. So we can say the emptiness of the cup came into existence at the same time the cup came into existence, but not in the same way, not by putting together the materials. I know it's hard. Also, if we don't really understand what emptiness is, it's more difficult to understand that. But this is a good question, and there's a lot of discussion about this. And let's look at the other example, the absence of an elephant in the room. Okay, so right now there's no elephant in this room, and this is a phenomena. This is something that exists because we can know it. The criteria in Buddhism for what exists, how do we know if something exists, is if it can be known by a valid mind, a correct mind, a correct state of mind, a correct consciousness. So as long as there is a correct mind, a valid mind, that knows an object, that object exists. So we can know that there's no elephant in this room because if someone were to come in here and say, "Where's the elephant? I'm looking for the elephant," we can all say, "There's no elephant in here." Okay, we can say with absolute certainty, "There's no elephant in this room." Right? It's not like a little mouse that can hide under the chairs or in the corner somewhere. An elephant's a huge animal, so if there was an elephant, we would know it. So we can know that there is no elephant. So this is something we can know with certainty, the absence of an elephant. Okay, or you could say the absence of Donald Trump. Okay, if Donald Trump was in this room, I'm sure we would know it, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody comes looking for him and says, "Is he here?" we could all say, "No." Thank goodness. No, maybe it's good if he were here. Maybe he would learn something useful. So these absences, there's actually lots of absences. We can know them, so they are phenomena, they're things that exist. But they're not like impermanent phenomena. They aren't things that come into existence by putting together causes and conditions, and then they arise from causes and conditions. They don't come into existence in that way. And they're also things that don't change moment by moment. There's no substance there that can change momentarily. But they can go out of existence. Because if an elephant came into this room, or if Donald Trump came into this room, the absence of that particular object would no longer be there. So the meaning of permanent and impermanent isn't exactly the same as how we normally understand them. Now this whole discussion may seem too abstract for you, but like I say, it does have meaning, because like emptiness, this very important phenomena that we need to understand, need to realize eventually, to be able to free ourselves from suffering and reach nirvana enlightenment, it's a permanent phenomenon. So it is helpful to have some understanding of the difference between impermanent and permanent phenomena. But it is somewhat tricky and difficult. So if you don't understand it right now, don't worry. I think the more you contemplate and hear teachings, then the easier it gets. Yeah.
Well, transformation. Where comes in transformation? Has something to do with
Transformation of what? You mean the mind?
this cup, and cup is broken, and then emptiness ceases to exist. But I think transformation, as is so much used in Tantra,
You're saying transformation in Tantra?
yeah, it is some kind of transformation in our minds.
Okay, yeah. I mean, well, not just Tantra, but a whole of Buddhism is talking about transformation of our mind. That's really what we're trying to do here, is transform our mind. Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the good things about impermanence, one of the positive aspects of impermanence. Because if our mind was not impermanent, if it didn't change moment by moment, if it was permanent, then we wouldn't be able to change our mind. Our mind will be stuck the way it is, with all our delusions and all our suffering. So the fact that our mind is not permanent, the fact that it's impermanent, it's dependent on causes and conditions, it changes moment by moment. So that's a good thing, because that means that we can work on our mind and bring about changes, bring about transformation. We can free our mind from the disturbing emotions. We can develop the positive qualities, love and compassion and wisdom. So that's a fantastic thing, thanks to impermanence. And also that when we change our mind, we also change reality. Because with a transformed mind, a changed mind, the way that you see things, the way you react to things, the way you deal with people and the world and phenomena and so on, will be transformed. So, yeah, so fantastic. Okay, so we need to stop there and have a break for lunch. So we'll start again in an hour, 1:30.